I imagine all of you saw the play when it was on Broadway.
I didn't.
You didn't?
No.
And for the three of you that did, are you happy you did? Or were there times that you wish that you hadn't as you were filming this?
I was so happy I did. I love, sounds so corny. I love going to the theater. I love going to the theater. I love it. You know, so when you asked me that question, I'm like, yeah, I was extraordinarily happy that I saw that. And ultimately, the film was a different thing. And it truly became a different thing. And I'm glad, I mean, personally, I'm glad I just had the opportunity to get a shot at playing that role.
It's one of the few times that I have been in a theater where twice the audience audibly, as one voice, gasped, you know. And that's really an
You know, sometimes that's a question for the viewer and the audience more so than the actor.
That's so true.
That the audience has to be open enough for another interpretation, you know, and another voice. And sometimes they're resistant to that. That's sometimes the part that, you know, people really need to explore more.
Once we were shooting it, the question of us seeing the play is not even in our mind. I mean, and I don't think it came back up again until asked.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it really is a great observation that I do think the viewers who've seen the play, it's more of a question for them now in comparing and contrasting stuff. But for us, that had to be kind of left to the side, I think.
Do you think a movie audience is less tolerant of uncertainty in what they're watching than a theater audience?
They're less used to it.
Yeah.
Theater audiences are more challenged generally in every way. That's sort of the point of the theater. And if you don't like that, you don't go to the theater. And so I think, yes, the answer to your question is they're not used to it. I don't know if they don't like it. I think it's something that maybe grows on you and you think about it longer than you thought you would. Because movie audiences, we tend to make it, speaking as a member of one, we tend to make our quick decision about it, you know, almost 10 minutes in. We watch the first 10 minutes of a movie like a trailer. Am I going to stay or am I going to stay? And it's a different commitment you make to watching a play. You don't get up and leave if you don't like it.
That would be the worst way to watch this movie, would be with any snap judgments after a 10-minute period of time, wouldn't it?
Well, I think John kind of counts on you making those snap judgments and then undermining them. He wants to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say, I made a snap judgment when I first read the character. Completely.
Which character?
My character.
Yours.
I wasn't reading their character.
Sorry.
Blah, 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 blah.
So she's like,
It was Mrs. Miller's story. It was a story about Mrs. Miller.
Right. With 85 other pages.
Yeah, exactly. And then you discover who the character is, and then that's the moment that it's up to you to have courage. You have to have courage to just kind of trust that we have to tell the truth of who the character is. I wanted her to be someone different.
I can only imagine the amount of times you've all been asked, so did he do it? That's not the most productive question. I want to know, what do you all think an audience should be debating?
When I saw the whole film put together, I thought about my own tendency to be judgmental.
Yes.
And what?
oh, I'm just laughing. It's a human thing. It makes me laugh.
And I thought about, this will be hard for critics because they are that, you know,
Yes,
and it's, will they see themselves? No. You sit back from certain films and just let them entertain you. But the ones that are really annoying are the ones that reach in and ask a question that's a little unnerving. So.
In my fantasy, I would think that if anyone went into therapy who was kind of arrogant about their own shortcomings, I think the moment of truth would be in therapy if their hearts were convicted and they really saw their putridness. Seriously, if they, you know, the therapist really just just showed them their shortcomings. The moment of truth would come if they stayed in the therapy and battled it out, or if they left. Now, there are a lot of people who would just leave. And it's the same thing with the movie. Once your heart is convicted, about your own tendencies to be judgmental and to have rigid belief systems, are you going to explore them? Are you going to acknowledge that?
It is fun to hear people's conversations, and I never interject. And they're waiting for me to tell them. Mm-hmm. And they say, well, what do you think? And I say, it's not about what I think, it's about what you think, and that's what's great about the film. Because it's about what each person thinks and what experience they walk into this film with and what their perspective is. More than any film I've ever done, people bring their own personal perspective and they are just not going to move. Yeah. They're like, no, I know that character. Yeah, exactly. I know her. And I'm like, but you don't.
You spend your life creating yourself. Do you know? I think you know what I mean? Not actively, but you spend your life and you become who you are, whether you're aware of it or not. And those moments in life where you're like, oh, wait, what if everything I put together in this very careful way is standing on sand? Yes. It's and you see the energy it takes to, and I am speaking from energy sometimes it takes to hold on to who you are, what you stand for, stand by, or how you're living your life. And then sometimes that idea of like, I'm not going to hold on. Am I going to hold on? And poof, and that thing that happens, and when that happens, how things flood in and flood out. And sometimes it closes up like 5 minutes later. And I do think, I would hope that this film would, because I think what Viola and Meryl do in the movie, and then what ultimately Meryl does in the movie through Sister Aloysius, is that moment of, it's allowing you to open that thing.
One of the centerpieces of the film is the scene with the two of you, Mrs. Miller and Sister Aloysius. In the film, a lot of it takes place outside. You're walking through the sidewalk. In the play, I think it was all inside. What do you think it adds to it to have it be outside?
I'm not sure it's so dependent on the setting as the game-changing aspect of the human emotion that is uncovered and revealed. And I think that the film, the play is going in one direction. Did he, didn't he? Did he, didn't he? And then this other information from Mrs. Miller comes, emotional information. It completely takes a left turn. The whole thing goes, didn't see that coming.
I still felt very powerless, in the scene.
Even though you're taller than me.
Yeah, and even though I'm tougher than you, Mel.
No!
I 15 rounds with you. No, I'm only kidding. No, that was really a joke.
You and I talked a couple weeks ago, and I asked you what it was like, because Sister James is so much more inward and a little quieter than the people that she's surrounded with in this film, and whether that was difficult to maintain. Her
silence was her strength. Once I surrendered to that, because that's something I haven't learned in life, and I'm working on.
Are you working on it now?
Right now? I did. If you noticed, I started really loud, and now I've become an active listener.
I got you. I see it.
The difficult part about it for me was that the character doesn't have that moment of release. She never gets to cry. She never gets to scream. She's completely restrained and respectful. And sometimes as an actor, you want a release.
Do the two of you want to play nuns now in every movie you do because you don't have to worry about your hair and you can eat what you want and because you're covered up? Or do you have to worry about your hair, even though it's underneath?
I didn't worry about it.
You just had to make, we had a team of people just to tuck away flyaways.
Yes.
Like little pieces.
There was this moment where we were shooting, and I would say this, I don't know, not to embarrass Meryl, but they were in this thing, and I remember I had to go, and I had to leave, and I had some off-camera stuff, something like that. And as actors, you always check in, because you want to make sure that if you're going to leave, that everything's cool. Sometimes you check in. And I remember opening the door. Meryl was in the room, and she had it off. Yeah. And I remember she turned around and looked at me. I thought, what a pretty woman. I actually said it. Remember?
Yes,
I was like, because I had seen her in this thing for days and days and days, and I was like, it just came out of my mouth. I was like, because the difference was so shocking.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And
That's sweet.
it's true.
I was in rehearsal with another show, and I was on a break, and an actor said, what are you thinking of doing next? I said, I want to write a play called Doubt. That's all I got, just got a title. But over time, it occurred to me to write about the Sisters of Charity that educated me when I was a boy in the Bronx. When I was 6 years old, my first teacher was a nun named Sister James. And I had a very strong impression of her, that she was a good educator, that she was warm, but she did not indulge her warmth. She had a philosophy of teaching, and she stuck to it. And I did not see Sister James ever again until I wrote Doubt.
The phone rang, and someone asked for Sister James. It was this lovely young woman. She was Geraldine Cunningham when I taught her at St. Anthony's many years ago. And she brought up the play called Doubt. And she said, and do you know that Sister James in the play is really about you? And I said, oh, stop. I can't believe that.
Sister James showed up and watched the play with me. I was terrified because I took her as a jumping off point, but it wasn't strictly her, you know.
I don't think I was apprehensive about the play itself. I think I was totally intrigued by the plot.
I wanted to write about just the day-to-day existence of what it was like for all the people who don't know what it was like to be in a little church school in a neighborhood in the Bronx in 1964. I never have any predisposition to think I know how an audience is going to respond to a play of mine. But over time, the thing that I did know about the play was that the last act of the play took place after the play was over. And people walked out and discovered that the person that they'd gone with, their wife, their husband, their friend, didn't see the same play they did. Well, the interesting thing about Doubt when we did it as a play is we first did it at Manhattan Theater Club in a 300-seat house, and it went well. Then we moved it to Broadway, and the response doubled from what it had been in the previous house. It was very hard to adapt it into a screenplay because it was conceived as a play for 4 people in a couple of rooms, and then I had to open it up, as they say. And then I thought, let go of it, and remember the place that you come from. Remember those families, the community, the people on the street, the kids in the class. Then it won't be so hard. Then it became a much richer experience and a much richer vein to mine to figure out how to tell the story. And then it became easier.
Jimmy, go to the store, buy me the newspaper and sing on it.
I can't. I'm serving Mass. I'm an altar boy.
I've written a lot of plays. I've written a lot of movies. And I've gone back and forth between the two forms fairly often. And I like to think that they cross-pollinate each other, and I'm able to use techniques from one in the other. And certainly my theatrical background and my theatrical taste play a part in what some of these big scenes feel like and look like in the film.
That's perfectly good. You need a lot. You need the flow of music.
Playwrights have a hard time directing their plays sometimes. And I think John knew exactly what he wanted to do. And I think he had an open mind as it was being done and changing and adapting as we went along effortlessly, I really thought. And he had a really great way about him on the set. So I have no doubt that he was the man for the job the whole time. He did a really great job.
So much of what's eloquent is in the moments where nothing is said. He understood the piece as an organism, as it's breathing in and breathing out.
It's got to stay true to form in order to keep its impact and power. He wrote it. It's in his head. And so he's the only one who can really bring it to life.
I think it's always important to research the time and research the place. And so much of that did come from John Patrick Shanley and from not only the play, but the adaptation.
We are at the intersection of St. Lawrence and Mansion. Behind us is the Catholic school where John Patrick Shanley attended first grade and grew up in this neighborhood here in the Bronx. So we have been in the heart of this story, and that's like a very, very rare gift, I think. and I think I know that that's a sort of wonderful gift for John, to be able to shoot the story in his own backyard of his youth.
If I had him play A Very Beautiful Zither, then off camera I could have him play this, record everything.
Okay, you do amazing what you do.
Well, this is a very New York picture and a very New York story. I'm from the Bronx. I've lived in New York all my life, and I wanted to go back and shoot in those locations.
The amazing thing about the neighborhood where John grew up, and this particular intersection where the school was, is that it seemed to have changed almost not at all.
We went back and shot on the street that I grew up on, and revisited many little things that add a richness and a texture to what you're doing that you can't replicate by going to Minnesota and saying it's New York. We had kids when I was growing up in the movie who are now playing parents in the congregation. We hired Sister Peggy, who's still teaching now, as our technical advisor. And she was on the set a lot and showed Meryl and Amy how to wear their bonnets and put on the rosary beads and all of that kind of stuff. I think it would have been kind of boring and derivative to attempt to take the stage play and just sort of recreate it in film. If we were going to do this, the amount of creative vitality that's necessary to mount a film required a fresh point of view. And I provide a fresh point of view because I didn't direct the play. And the cast really needs to provide that as well. And Meryl was the first person, Meryl Streep, that I thought of, as I think practically everybody did, for Sister Aloysius, because it just seemed to be an inevitable idea. And she immediately was on board, because I guess she felt the same way. So to begin with, I guess you went and saw the play. And could you tell me what that was like?
It was great. It was a great night in the theater, one of the great nights in the theater I've ever had, because I knew nothing about the play. I was there late in the run. I felt very guilty because I hadn't gotten there earlier to see it, and everybody talked about it and said, "Oh, you have to see it." And I said, "What's it about?" "Oh, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you." So, I didn't go because nobody would tell me what it was about. But finally I went, and it blew me away and I understood why people were not telling me what it was about, because you wreck it. Yeah. Anyway, Cherry Jones just sort of delivered a blow to my solar plexus at the end of that play. And I'd already been, had gone on an emotional roller coaster with the play. But I was shocked at the end, and I never feel that in the theater. I was torn up by many of the performances.
So now, I just want to talk a little bit about what it was like to work with your cast members. Were you pleased with the choice of Philip Seymour Hoffman for the role? Or?
I think he's, one of my favorite people to work with in my life. We've worked together twice. I want to work with him 1,000 more times. And he brings so many layers of humanity to the parts that he plays.
So I was, a fan of the play, but I never thought about playing the part. I was never anything in my mind of playing the part until John Shanley called me to offer me the role of Father Flynn in the film, which took me by surprise. And so I had to think about it then, and I didn't think about it too much. It just kind of answered itself pretty quickly.
I thought that he was one of the most surprising, mercurial, and powerful actors. And he read the script and said, "Yeah, I'll do it."
I probably could have done without doing any research, but I did. I have a friend, Father Jim, and I talked with him, and I wanted to know what certain things meant, and I'd seen sermons done before, but I went and saw a couple while I was rehearsing it.
Had you worked with Amy Adams before this picture?
No.
And so what was the experience of working with her like?
It was delicious. There are very few people that are young actresses, really, who can convey being truly innocent, being really, the untrammeled snow. She can do that.
I had tea with Amy Adams here in New York at the Cupcake Cafe, and she was just a terrific choice for Sister James. Sort of the perfect, warm center of the film between these two kind of battling giants that this principal and this priest were going to be. And I thought that she could hold her own. And I feel very confident in saying after shooting the film that she has held her own very well.
I was familiar with the play, and I absolutely loved the way that it was adapted for screen, and I just fell in love with the character, and it was really something that I felt strongly about doing.
She came up for dinner to the convent, and I was so delighted to meet her. And I think she makes Sister James come alive in a very vibrant way.
I learned a lot about my character from the way that Meryl approached Sister Aloysius and the way that Philip approached Father Flynn.
As a mother,
Yeah.
that scene that you play with Viola Davis, where she's telling you the things that she's telling you, and
Yes.
how did that feel?
Her work was so fully realized and revelatory, and it's great. It's great.
Viola Davis was Scott Rudin's great passion. He thought that she was the perfect person for the role, and I was not convinced. And we did a screen test with, I have to say, some of the most talented actresses I've ever seen. And Viola gave a great screen test, and she won the role.
I don't want to speak for the other actors, but I'm going to attempt to. I think we were all terrified, and there's no egos. There were no egos, and you don't want to see the devices. You don't want to see the function. You want to see people.
There's so many ways that people express their identity that have to do with clothing, the choice of eyeglasses that you wear.
Yeah. Everything's a choice.
You don't have any of those choices to make when you're wearing the habit. And as an actress, expressing your identity or expressing your point of view, I would imagine gets channeled almost like that bonnet channels your face forward and not to the left or right.
You think you don't have a choice. It's just like in my town. There were the kids that went to high school, and then there were the girls that went to the Catholic school. Now you'd think, well, they have a uniform. No. It just means that the number of choices get narrowed, but the choices in how you differentiate become so eloquent and so sizable, how far you roll that skirt up. Similarly with Sister Aloysius. Everybody wears a hat that goes like this, but you can bend it to go like this. Do you know what I'm saying? Everything is a choice. Where you wear that rosary, some people, when I spoke with the nuns, everybody had her own way, which was the way to do it, to drape the rosary. This is the correct way. But two different nuns would tell me a different way. So, the individual is there.
Yeah.
It's always there.
There's all kinds of faith, and all of these faiths are tested in one way or another over time. The Sisters of Charity, I've never seen depicted in any other film or play, and I thought that people would be interested to see what these people were like.
When I saw the movie, I was involved in the emotion of it and its argument and its passions and all those things. What I wasn't prepared for was its beauty. It's really, Roger Deakins, the cinematographer, it's like, it's beautiful. And people really see it through the prism of their own biases, their own experience, their own emotional connection to not just the church, but to authority, certain kinds of authority, celestial and temporal authority. It can be read on a lot of different levels.
Now, we're all faced with this throughout our lives, You never can be utterly sure of anything. And yet, sometimes action is called for. This story allows you to experience the struggle to be certain in an uncertain world.